Hello and welcome to Beyond the Arena, the show that looks past the on-court perspective of student athletes and deep dives into the backstage components that are less frequently talked about.
We're your hosts, Savannah Repack and Brianna Vesley. Today we're going to talk about eating disorders, depression, and anxiety. We'll discuss the ins and outs of these topics and offer insight on how these affect student athletes around the world. We're going to start today's episode with the food and fuel component of being a student athlete. Eating disorders can be developed in all sports, but statistics show that genetics play a big role, but other factors can play in.
Some sports environments can increase the risk for eating disorders or disordered eating. The two terms are related but not always the same. All eating disorders involve disordered eating, but not all disordered eating meets criteria for an eating disorder.
Disordered eating is defined as a wide spectrum of harmful and often ineffective eating behaviors used in attempts to lose weight or attain a lean appearance.
Whereas eating disorders such as anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating are a persistent disturbance of eating or an eating-related behavior that significantly impairs physical health or psychosocial functioning.
So a big part of this is your meal times. When you're an athlete, your game time, your practice time can really overlap that main dinner time, like the 5:30 to probably like 7:30 timeline. And so you want to eat before your practice because you don't want to get sick when you're not having fuel, but you don't want to eat too much, and you're missing that main dinner time to just have a good meal. And so you can be snacking before, you can be snacking after. Your dinners are just often not on the right spectrum.
And I definitely feel like when you don't eat, like before a practice, you know it, but as you don't eat, your muscle is like losing. You're losing your muscle, your body's eating away at your muscle, but you also know that if you eat too much or too little, it's going to affect your performance no matter what you do.
Yeah, so a quick and easy energy source that you can grab before a practice or a game are your fruits, your milk, your veggies. They're carbs, but they're not heavy that they're going to make you sick when it comes to heavy practicing and playing, but they are just enough to keep your body moving. When you are like maybe say a day before a game, a good energy source that'll keep you going over a long period of time are your complex carbs, like pasta, bread. Those heavy carbs will give your body more energy so that you have that source to use. Your protein should make up 10% to 15% of your daily calories. This will significantly help you when it comes to game time. You have that source, and before your events, you should be eating these in 2 to 4 hours. You should have high in complex carbs, low in your protein and sugar. The main component, though, is staying hydrated. It's the most important part. You need to give your body that water, that Gatorade, the milk. It keeps your body's energy just flowing. Your muscles are ready. You're on your point.
Especially during a high-performance game, because you figure you're sweating, you're using a lot of your energy to compete at a high level. You need to stay hydrated so you can keep performing to that extent.
Yeah, and all of this plays into your just the disorders of eating. You're eating to maintain your body's appearance, you're eating to maintain your muscle, you're eating to maintain your energy, and it can create these disordered eating or even eating disorders if it gets to a serious point.
According to the NCAA, 19% of athletes suffer from body dysmorphic disorders, compared to 2% in the general population. Roughly 40% of participating NCAA student athletes reported levels of depression. High-performance athletes are twice as likely to experience high depression scores than non-athletes.
Yeah, I think that's being an athlete is definitely a lot of pressure, a lot of missing out, and amount of sleep that you're not getting. And so I think it all definitely plays into that high depression. So I don't know, is there something you want to jump into?
I mean, as a student athlete, I feel like you're all held to a higher standard because you're representing your team, you're representing your organization that you're competing for, playing for, whatever. But when you are held to a higher standard, I feel like it can get in your head too much. Like, you focus too much on the uncontrollables that you forget about controlling the controllables. Like, the amount of sleep is something you can control in a way, but I feel like after a long day of, like, school, practices, or a game, when you get home, it feels like a weight on your shoulders. Like, you feel like you have to eat dinner, you have homework, you have to shower, you have to do all these things to keep up with your out-of-sport life, that it affects your amount of sleep. And when you get home late and you have all this stuff to do, I feel like it's still really important to get the 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. And most athletes are only getting 4 to 6, 5 to 8, something around those lines, where they don't get enough sleep to compete at the level they need to. And it deters your athletic performance if you don't get the suggested amount of sleep, because you're wearing your body down over time. And I feel like that comes with being overworked in a way too, because you can practice every day and you can get 8 hours of sleep a night, and your body will still be run down if you don't give it the amount of rest that it needs.
Yeah, overworking your body is definitely an important thing. If you're working out every single day, even adding on to that practice time, you're not giving your muscles enough time to relax. You're not giving your brain enough time to even just reset so that you're ready for your next playtime. And so it definitely will affect your athletic performance. It'll definitely affect your mental mindset, just everything. It all comes back to letting yourself rest, giving yourself the amount of energy that you need to perform.
And I feel like when student athletes are suffering mentally and they develop depression, a lot of it could be from their social life balance and social media. Because if you're practicing and you're competing 6 to 7 days out of the week, you're missing out on a lot of friends and activities that your non-athlete friends are doing, or your athlete friends that don't practice or compete the same schedule that you're on. So you figure you can have half to more of your friend group going out and hanging out 3 days a week, but you're stuck at practice, and then you see it on social media and you're like, oh wait, I was at practice, why am I missing out on this? Why am I still doing this if I can go out and have fun with my friends?
Yeah, for sure. The commitment is when you're so committed to your sport and you see others who are not as committed to sports or don't even play sports, it's not, a bad thing, but you just have different priorities. And so when you have that sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, you have to reflect, you have to see, well, if I'm committed to this, then there's other things that I have to sacrifice so that I can make things work. And you shouldn't let that affect your mindset. It's a hard thing to say. It's so easier said than done, than letting yourself feel that pressure, feel that missing out. It's a lot on the mind, but you really have to step back and look and see, am I committed to this? Am I committed to my sport? Or am I committed to other things like social life? And it's fine either way, but you have to look at it in both perspectives.
No, and I definitely feel like the fear of missing out ties into anxiety. And the American College of Sports Medicine reported that among student athletes, approximately 30% of women and 25% of men report having anxiety. And then only 10% of the student athletes in the world with no mental health conditions seek help from a mental health professional. Can you point out 10 people on your team and say, oh yeah, only one of these people who might be suffering from anxiety, eating disorders, depression, only one of them is getting help?
Yeah, one common mental state of athletes experience anxiety. And now when we think of anxiety, we often think of being worried as an emotion, or such as nervousness or dread, but high stress situations like big games or life-changing situations, or even injuries that could bring this on, there's more to it than what meets the eye. You're balancing your schoolwork, your time management. you're a student athlete. You have to work on both. And when you have big tests on days of big game days, you have so much going on in your brain that it's an overload of stress.
Yeah, and I feel like we touched on this when we mentioned depression, but balancing your schoolwork and amount of sleep, dinner, etc., that all goes into your time management. And when you overthink one thing or you focus on one thing more than the other, that's going to affect your time management, and it can stress you out 10 times more than it needs to be. It just all comes down to how you're managing your time and how you go into that.
Yeah, your amount of schoolwork, your early practices, your late nights, it's just time management. And then when it comes to the big games, you have a big game, but you also have a big test tomorrow. And so I need to study, but I also have to perform. And so it plays into it, really. So another thing is just when you come to these big games, you have that stress of your work, but you also have the fear of failing teammates or coaches. This plays into like almost every student athlete. You have the fear that you're just not going to live up to expectations, and that is an extreme part of anxiety.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like a lot of student athletes put so much pressure on themselves to perform at this high extent, and then they think, what if I fail my teammates or my coaches? Because I feel like a lot of coaches do put a lot of pressure on their athletes and say that they have to perform to a certain standard, or maybe they're not good enough, or maybe their teammates won't see them in a high standard anymore because they have one, maybe two bad performances, or don't play the same each game, etc.
Yeah, all those factors are definitely playing in to your headspace. It's a lot. And so there's a lot of different ways you can handle this amount of stress. You can talk yourself through it. There's a lot of visualizing techniques, self-talk techniques, breathing exercises, a lot of breathing exercises. They help you reset your mind. You're taking those deep breaths so that you can calm yourself down. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to perform, and I'm not holding myself to a standard that I don't know if it's reachable. You're preparing yourself to do your best, and then you're going to leave your game and you're going to prepare yourself to do the best for your out of school life, like your student athlete life. And so there's so many techniques. And if you're super struggling, you can always reach out to anybody for help. You can go just guidance counselors, teachers, coaches. Everybody is there to help you because everybody knows what it feels like just to go through that stuff. It's a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like even here at Latrobe, we have a mental health for student athletes club that is starting to meet almost twice a week to just talk about it, because there are so many athletes that go through things alone, or they feel like they're alone, and we want them to know that they're not alone. And I feel like Cody Weaver does a great job sitting down and talking to them about like what's going on and how to handle it.
Yeah, that's definitely an improvement. I love seeing that people are finally like reaching out to these athletes and helping one another, because the struggle is real.
Yeah, and there's such a stigma on reaching out with mental health problems. And I feel like athletes, they don't want people to think they're breaking or it's affecting their performance, so they stay quiet, and it just hurts them even more in the long run because they're not talking about it. And sometimes just talking about it helps a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. Talking to anybody, talking to yourself, writing it down, and even just a journal. It's so important to get your feelings out of your mind so that you are less stressed. You have that performance that you can do well.
And I feel like all these resources that we have on the screen right now, it's going to help play a role in student athletes, so they have someone to talk to and they can go and figure out what their next step is, whether that's therapy or team meetings, whatever they might feel that could help them. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for tuning in to the first edition of Beyond the Arena.
Be sure to check in back next time when we sit down with athletes who have been closely impacted by injury.